Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are tuning in, you're looking for the clearest path through some complex information. And today, we have a truly compelling dilemma to navigate.
We really do.
We're diving into a stack of sources that put two urgent urban problems into a stark, almost uncomfortable contrast.
hmm
We're looking at how major cities, specifically New York City, decide whose needs get met first when it comes to affordable housing.
It's really an essential look at how policy gets prioritized. The sources discuss a proposed policy focusing on one type of need, cultural vitality, and then set it against this backdrop of a much more immediate crisis.
Which is making sure every child has enough to eat.
Exactly.
So the hook really is this discussion in the New York City Council about an initiative to provide affordable housing for artists, which on its face seems like an important step for cultural support.
Sure. But the sources immediately challenge that focus by comparing it to the overwhelming urgency of child hunger in that same city.
It forces a hard conversation. And our mission today isn't to diminish the value of art or culture, but it's more to analyze this really painful policy choice.
Right. We want to unpack how these issues that seem so separate, housing for creatives and food for children, can maybe be solved at the same time through, integrated, purpose-driven real estate solutions.
And as we get into those solutions, we'll bring in this concept of profit with purpose. We're going to look at a model from Robert Flowers and Flowers and Associates, which focuses on impact-driven income, specifically through special needs housing.
It's a great example of how the private sector can get involved in solving these huge social challenges while still being financially viable.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. This tension, it really shows that resources aren't just scarce. They're often siloed based on, what's politically popular.
Right.
We have to get beyond just building a roof. We need to design housing that actually works to solve multiple societal issues at once. If we just accept that resources are finite, then the only way forward is through integration, where one building addresses many community needs. And that integrated approach, that's the core of our deep dive today.
Okay, so let's start with the details of the NYC Council's proposal for artists. The sources make a very compelling case for why this policy is needed, at least from a cultural and economic view.
They absolutely do. The sources really hammer home that New York City's whole identity is tied to its arts community.
Yeah.
But the cost of living has just been pushing countless artists out.
So by creating dedicated housing units, subsidized rent programs, the council is trying to stop that cultural erosion.
Exactly. It's a policy designed to stabilize what is really an economic driver. The sources mention things like long-term affordable leases, specialized studio spaces.
And partnerships with arts organizations. The whole idea is if you give them a secure foundation, the arts economy can thrive, and that adds to the energy of a neighborhood. It's framed as an investment in the city's brand.
And that's a worthy goal, no question. But then the source material delivers this incredibly powerful counterpoint.
The severe issue of child hunger. They call it the critical question that should frame every other decision.
And the numbers are, well, they're just staggering.
Yeah, we're not talking about a marginal problem here. We're talking about a profound systemic failure. The sources report that almost 1 in 4 children in New York City is facing food insecurity.
1 in 4.
That's not some future problem. It's an immediate day-to-day crisis for hundreds of thousands of families.
It's a statistic that should honestly stop all other policy discussions until it's fixed. When nearly 25% of your next generation doesn't have consistent access to nutritious food, the consequences of that ripple out and destroy the very fabric that these arts programs are trying to enrich.
Right, and the sources detail those consequences. A kid who is hungry can't focus in school, which leads directly to lower educational outcomes.
And then, down the line, chronic food insecurity leads to much higher rates of long-term health problems, obesity, diabetes, all these diet-related illnesses that strain the healthcare system and reduce productivity later in life. It's so foundational.
So this is where the policy dilemma just gets so sharp. Policymakers have to decide. Is it ethically defensible to support a subsidized apartment for an artist, which helps the city's cultural reputation, when you need massive resources just to keep children from going to bed hungry tonight?
And the sources really challenge that whole balancing act. They argue that you just can't view supporting cultural needs as equal to addressing the basic human right to food.
It suggests a level of policy maturity that has to go beyond just funding the popular programs. The conversation needs to shift from, do we fund art or food, to how do we build community infrastructure that provides both.
Yes, that dichotomy, as it's presented, is just not politically sustainable if your goal is actual community well-being.
The resources going to the housing crisis have to inherently include solutions for food insecurity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just moving under-resourced people from one rundown apartment to a new, shiny one without ever addressing the root causes of their struggle.
And that's the perfect transition, because this is the strategic pivot in the source material. Moving from that uncomfortable either to the essential strategy of integrating solutions. This is where housing as a unifier really starts to take hold.
And what's fascinating here is the mindset shift. We often see affordable housing as solving one problem, shelter. But the integrated approach sees it as a multi-tool.
A multi-tool.
Yeah, one designed to tackle several urgent community needs at the same time. If you're spending massive capital to develop urban land, that structure has to maximize its social return.
So the sources outline what this actually looks like. Instead of just a standard apartment building, you have integrated social services literally baked into the development plan from day one.
Right. They set examples of successful projects that have dedicated art and maker spaces right alongside fully operational food pantries and community kitchens.
And it goes beyond just food and culture. This holistic approach can extend to specialized care.
Exactly. And this is where that idea of profit with purpose and the work in special needs housing comes into such sharp focus. It's about using private capital to meet the needs of a high-need, consistently funded part of the population.
So let's dig into that model. Robert Flowers and Associates are really held up in the sources as a prime example of the private sector successfully mixing profit with purpose. They specifically target a population that is often severely overlooked in typical real estate development. Adults with disabilities who need what's called special needs housing, or SNH.
And the economic analysis here is so important because it explains why the model is so stable. Robert Flowers, who's a recognized investor, he basically identified a critical inefficiency in the market.
Okay, what's that?
Well, standard rentals are volatile. They go up and down with the market. But SNH is structurally different because it addresses these long-term specialized care needs.
The structural difference is the key. When we say special needs housing, we don't just mean a standard apartment.
No, not at all. We're talking about properties that involve intensive supportive services, sometimes medical care, transportation, specialized supervision.
And crucially, those services, and therefore the stable tenancy, are often funded through long-term government contracts, usually managed by nonprofit service providers.
Precisely. And the Flowers and Associates model capitalizes on that stability. They partner with these certified nonprofits and provide the high-quality, specialized housing that they need.
So the economic benefit works two ways. First, they provide excellent housing for vulnerable adults, which fills a huge social need.
Right.
And second, for the landlords they work with, it creates an incredibly stable revenue stream. Because the tenants are supported by these nonprofits with long-term contracts, the passive income is protected from typical market risks, like high turnover or vacancies.
This is exactly why the sources call it impact-driven income. The commitment from the nonprofit partner, who has a stable, often state-funded budget to house these people, it acts as the anchor for the private investment.
It lets landlords earn passive income, not through the crazy volatile rental market,
But by basically co-investing in social infrastructure, it proves that the greatest social benefit can also be your core revenue driver.
which completely moves the conversation out of that old charity versus profit framework.
It does. It's about designing a partnership where the social outcome, stable housing for adults with disabilities, is the direct guarantee of the financial outcome. It's a brilliant market solution to a policy failure.
And this whole framework integrating specialized needs with stable finance directly informs the broader strategy for integrated housing that the sources are pushing for.
Whether that integration includes food pantries, art studios, or specialized care facilities, it requires real collaboration across all sectors.
Okay, let's move into the actionable steps forward that the sources outline. Because this integrated vision, it sounds great, but it's not easy to pull off.
No. You face zoning challenges, funding silos, and of course NIMBism not in my backyard when you try to build housing that's both specialized and centralized.
So what's the first step?
The first actionable step they suggest is to fundamentally expand the criteria for affordable housing. Instead of just defining affordability by income level, we need criteria that include diverse, high-need demographics.
So artists, yes, but also adults with disabilities, formerly incarcerated people, or families that are dealing with immediate food insecurity.
Exactly. The sources also emphasize supporting programs that explicitly link artistic development with community nourishment.
What does that mean in practice?
It means that if a new development gets public funding for an art space, there has to be a mandatory commitment back to the community. Maybe providing nutrition classes or contributing resources to the food pantry next door. You have to tie culture and basic needs together institutionally.
Okay. And the third pillar.
It's straightforward, but it's non-negotiable. Advocate for significantly increased, sustained funding for child nutrition programs. The integrated housing provides the platform, but the operational money for the services inside, the food, the staff, the programming, that has to be secured through policy.
And this synthesis is really vital for you, the listener, especially if you're interested in directing capital toward positive impact. What does all this mean when you look at a model like special needs housing?
It means you don't have to wait for city councils to stop arguing over whether to prioritize artists or hungry children. You can actually participate in solving a huge piece of the housing puzzle, the lack of appropriate housing for adults with disabilities, by using a model that's already proven to be stable and impactful.
That philosophy that Robert Flowers articulates really speaks to this.
It does. Recognizing that successful urban development is at the intersection of impact and sound finance. It provides a clear, practical example of how that abstract concept of integrated solutions can be realized through private investment partnerships.
And for those who want to understand the nuts and bolts of how this specialization actually works, the sources point to resources from Robert Flowers himself.
Yeah, his book, The Joy of Helping Others, provides the motivational framework. It really gets into the immense need and the mission behind the work.
And maybe more importantly for investors and policymakers, there's the technical blueprint in creating passive income streams through special needs housing.
Right. Those resources turn this theoretical talk about blending profit and purpose into a real actionable investment strategy.
And this movement towards specialized, impactful real estate seems to be growing.
It is. For ongoing education and, deeper dives into the operational side of this field, the sources also recommend the Passive Impact podcast. These tools let potential investors move from just being curious into making an active, specialized contribution.
It's such a powerful lesson in how private markets, when they're guided toward defined social problems, can offer stability and solutions much faster than just relying on the slow gears of public bureaucracy.
A truly successful city is one where supporting cultural vibrancy doesn't come at the expense of ignoring basic human needs. This integrated model is really the only path that gets you both.
So let's wrap up this deep dive. We started with a sharp dichotomy in NYC policy. Housing for artists versus feeding hungry children. And I think our core takeaway is that this is a false choice.
It is a false choice.
Yeah.
The response to the housing crisis has to be comprehensive. It has to be integrated. We have to move beyond single-issue fixes to include basic human necessities, like food and specialized care, like housing for adults with disabilities.
We saw how models like special needs housing, championed by Flowers and Associates, provide a financially stable framework to do just that.
They prove that building infrastructure for well-being isn't just good policy. It can be a really sound economic strategy.
The lesson is clear. Housing is infrastructure for the entire community's health. And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to chew on. If integrated, community-focused housing is the undeniable answer, and we accept that food and art should be included, what other essential services, things we currently treat as separate city concerns, should be mandatorily integrated into all new urban residential developments going forward? Should every new building over a certain size be required to include on-site access to mental health services or dedicated vocational training centers?
That takes the idea of housing as infrastructure to its logical and probably necessary conclusion. That's a thought worth spending some time on.
Before we sign off, just a final resource reminder. If you are intrigued by the model of creating passive income through special needs housing and you want to learn more about Flowers and Associates, property rentals, or how to get involved, the resources are out there.
You can contact Flowers and Associates directly at 901-621-3544 or visit flowersandassociatesbooking.com to learn more about how their model works. They really operate on that philosophy of making a tangible difference one home at a time.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into policy, profit, and purpose. We'll catch you next time.